the trumpet already, is that it? I remember this East End Boys, movie, and there was a scene where one of them was playing the trumpet, and some bully decided to mess him up, and he took a lemon out and started eating it, and he couldn't get his pucker up. So I promised not to do that. What do we really want to do? I keep seeing these posters in the subway from one of the art schools here in New York. What do we really want to do? And then other posters show you can be a copywriter, you can be a computer designer. We're still being called out to, even in this crash of the economy, to be creative. We all have to be creative now, or face the consequences, which is precariousness, etc. The question is, how do you be resistantly creative, especially in an economy that's calling out to you to be creative? I'm just going to try to show you very quickly a little history about some options, some possibilities that hopefully will set us up for the next people. And am I hitting the red? There we go. Okay. Organized to assert your rights, the Art Workers Coalition invading the Guggenheim Museum in 1971 after Hans Haacke, my teacher, show was censored. The conga line went down the ramp, organized by Yvonne Rainier. Imagine artists doing this today, invading a major museum and protesting. Handing out literature at the opening of an exhibition of Nelson Rockefeller's collection. And Nelson Rockefeller that same year had put down the Attica uprising brutally here in New York. It was also the year that the staff workers at the Museum of Modern Art organized. Art Workers Coalition also inspired a contract so that artists could receive royalty payments on a resale of a work, something that has become law in some states since then, but it's mostly not considered proper. This contract also allowed you to take work back once a year, to show it if you wanted, to make repairs on your work so that you had control over it. The Art Workers Coalition also asked for museums to deaccession older works so they could create a health care and pension system for living artists. Imagine that. We wouldn't need the APT if we did that, would we? Reinterpret official histories, an anti-catalog. Several years later, the mid-1970s, Artists Meeting for Cultural Change. The Whitney Museum decided they were going to have the 200th anniversary of the founding of America in 1976, and they were going to put in John D. Rockefeller's collection. One woman, one African American was the only people in that exhibition other than white men. The anti-catalog was designed to be a sort of response to that. And it was in some ways one of the first instances of a kind of social history of art applied to the American context. Is John Rockefeller there? Questioning, what is the avant-garde? Remember when Courbet was involved in the demolition of the tower in France? Colin Vendôme, during the Commune. Interrupt their stolen spaces. The Poco Society outside Los Angeles, they actually go around putting up illegal plaques to tell alternative histories. In one case, they talked about a Siqueira's mural that was in downtown Los Angeles that had been painted over by local business people because they didn't like its anti-imperialist message. And they illegally added a plaque to remember it. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a group of artists, activists, amateur historians got together. They put up a series of metal plaques in the streets that told the history of the Great Railroad Strike. There was almost a general strike in Pittsburgh during the Great Depression of the last century. This is in the late 1900s. These signs were put up illegally. Most of them remain up because they subversively look exactly like historical markers. And they have a fantastic website, by the way, the Howling Mob Society, they call themselves. In Oakland, the Center for Tactical Magic and David Hilliard and Jeremy Deller put up a sign marking this traffic light, because this traffic light was actually gotten there on a corner leading up to a school by the Black Panther Party when the local community would not actually pay for it. The sign commemorates the site. Other examples is a group that I worked with in the 1990s, Repo History. We put up signs around Manhattan and in other cities marking unknown histories. This was outside the stock exchange by Jim Costanzo. It was before the events of 2001, which afterwards gave kind of a shudder to people, but it plays on the myth that people threw themselves out of windows after the stock crash of 1928. It also happened to be the 200th anniversary of the stock exchange. Those blue banners were flying for that reason, and even though we had permission to put this up, the stock exchange tried to have them removed. The Department of Transportation at the time said, no, once we give out a permit, we leave these things in place. Unfortunately, the man who was involved in that, Frank Audio, kind of an unknown hero here in New York of public art, then lost his job during the Giuliani administration, or retired, basically. We extended our critique through the newspapers, repo history, group material, put work inside the subways. This is subculture. Political art documentation distribution, an inflatable Pac-Man, Uncle Sam, demonstration art, which leads me to the next section, archive yourselves, document yourselves. PADD, or Political Art Documentation Distribution, has an archive at the Museum of Modern Art, and you can go visit it, you can make an appointment online, and you can see lots of other activist art from the last 30, 40 years primarily. Reinvent institutions, just as Paper Tiger has, Carnival Knowledge in the 1980s, group material, and the group that we just saw, WHW, rethinking the very notion of the biennial by making it transparent. And you must imagine your own community as well. Critical Art Ensemble, which had only recently, Steve Kurtz had been under investigation by the FBI and the Justice Department, only recently got off the hook. We have to imagine our communities and we have to defend our communities. And we also need to look here in New York where 339 Lafayette Street, which is sometimes known as the Peace Pentagon, is under the gun. It may actually be lost. Paper Tiger has its offices there. Repo History had its offices there. PADD had its offices there. Go to the website and try to help secure this space. It's a very important one for New York. Thank you.